Hey, this is Trey, and this is Thursdays with Trey, which is one day of the week I really look forward to for a couple of reasons. Get to hear your questions, and I get to talk to Mary Langston Willis. Mary Langston, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here. How was your Father's Day weekend?
Mary Langston, my mom made me a cheese ball. My wife made me spaghetti. And you brought me a dozen chocolate-covered donuts. So I'm trying to piece together the messages there that for some reason, three of the most important women in my life either don't want me going to the pool, or I'm just trying to. It was great. My daughter gave me two things related to golf, which I love very much. Mm-hmm. And my son was going to be my partner in the father-son. It got rained out, but we will play it again in August if I live that long. And of course, the U.S. Open was riveting and fun to watch. So it was great. How was your Father's Day?
It was great too. Hopefully he was happy.
If you're his daughter, I can tell you he's happy.
Well, I just wanted to say I'm grateful for you and for your fatherly example in my life. And one of the many things you've taught me is the importance of words. So that kind of leads us into our first question, which comes from Brad via Twitter. And he asks, how do you define joy?
How do I define joy? Some recognition that you have been successful and significant according to your own internal definition of those two words. I've really never thought a lot about the word joy. I can go get my wife, who is probably the most joyful person in the world, or you could answer it because you would be number two. Joy is not happiness, because you're not going to have happiness all the time. And sometimes external factors influence your happiness. There's almost an intentionality to joy. I don't want to say you will yourself to do it. You will yourself, I think, to accept, even with some resignation, the difficult things that happen in life. But it's really a mindset and not a feeling. I think joy probably will come if you do a good job of number one, setting your own expectations, or be careful who you choose to let the expectations for your own life in terms of what success is or what significance is. You know, you and I have a ton of friends that are looking at running for president or contemplating it. I think if my math is right, there have only been 45. So you cannot define joy as simply achieving some goal that only 45 people have ever achieved before. There has to be more to it than, titles, or certainly not money, status. Fame doesn't bring happiness or joy. So it's something internal. But you would know more about that than I would, because you're a more joyful person than I am.
Thank you. That was a beautiful description of the word joy. I think you did a great job. Our next question is from a listener named Brady, and he asked, Rep. Gowdy mentioned on a recent podcast that his mother was a victim advocate. What is their role in our government?
Well, victims advocates, they're in both the state and, they're at all levels. They're local, state, and federal. It's kind of come into being actually since I finished law school. So it's been within the last 30 years. But in the old days, it was viewed that because the crime is really against the state, or it's against the United States. I mean, that's the legal way to look at it, is even if somebody were to steal my lawnmower, the indictment reads the state of South Carolina versus. It does not read Trey Gowdy verse. Victim advocates are this acknowledgement that the state in reality is not the victim. There is a victim. In a homicide case, there are family members of the victims. In a sex assault case, there is a victim. In a robbery case, there is a victim. Domestic violence. Victim advocates number one, educate the victim or the family on how the court process works from bond through indictment. They serve as kind of a liaison between the prosecutor. Nowadays, law enforcement have their own victim advocates because, as you know, Mary Langston, I mean, some crimes take forever to solve. So the prosecutor's not involved. If it's an unsolved homicide, the prosecutor's office isn't really involved. So the sheriff's department and the city police need victims advocates too. They, this is a longer conversation, and you probably regret asking the question. Our model of justice now still considers the crime to have been committed against the state. But we acknowledge there is a victim that is not named state. There's a real life victim. But we've not gone to this notion of restorative justice where the victim alone gets to decide. I'll tell you one interesting story. It's interesting to me. It may not be interesting to anyone else. I handled a homicide case, just the most incredible, outstanding victim. She worked for a law firm, but she was not yet a lawyer, but she wanted to go back to law school. And her husband killed her in a gruesome way that I will not go into the details of. And I met her mom. I met the victim's mom. And she was one of the kindest, sweetest, most gentle-spirited people I have ever met. And she forgave her son-in-law. And so she came to me and said, I don't want him to spend the rest of his life in prison. Yes, he killed my daughter. Yes, he ruined my life. Yes, he took the love of my life from me. But I don't want you to stand in front of the judge and ask for life in prison. So I'm asking you not to do it. Well, she does have rights. She is the victim's mother. But I had to tell her, I said, look, I respect you. I honor you, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do anything other than ask for the maximum for what he did. So do victims have rights? You have the right to know what is happening. You have the right to be consulted. But ultimately, it is the sheriff, it is the prosecutor, it is the judge, all of whom actually work for the state or for the United States. That's the final decision maker. So victims advocates, they educate, they explain, they counsel, they minister to, they show compassion. But in terms of being the decision maker, that's still, at least in South Carolina, is the sheriff, the solicitor, and the judge. Does any of that make sense?
It did. Yes, sir. I know your mom was really good at that. She has such compassion for others.
Well, Mary Langston, my mom, I remember, of course, when you're in law school, you really don't know what kind of law you want to practice. And nobody in my family had ever been a lawyer before. So it's not like I could ask somebody. My mom really wanted me to be a prosecutor because she was tired of seeing defendants be able to go hire any lawyer they wanted. But the victim is kind of stuck with the prosecutor. Because if you're a victim of a crime, you can't go hire the best lawyer in town to be your lawyer. Your lawyer is the state prosecutor. And my mom used to say, oh, I wish you would be a prosecutor because the defendant, the person who's accused of committing this horrific crime can go hire the best lawyer money can buy, but the victim does not. So yes, she cared very much about it. And truth be told, that's probably where my interest in being a prosecutor began.
It's amazing. Well, thank you.
Wait right there. We'll have more next.
Our next question is from Thomas from your website. And he asked, instead of tearing down history in our cities, why not just try to change our future, make it better? How do we find a middle ground?
I don't know. I don't know the middle ground. I really don't. I've thought about it. I've discussed it with people whose opinions I respect very much.
For the full podcast, go to foxnewspodcast.com.